It now finally seems as if the Detroit Pistons have a direction in which they're going. Because now they have this search for their new general manager, and we can finally see that they're rebuilding. Because over the last few years, they've been caught between contending and rebuilding. The last year they snuck into the playoffs. Blake Griffin, then he missed the playoffs with the injury or whatever. But now we can finally see where they're going because they traded Drummond at the trade deadline for Knight and Henson. They're both expiring contracts, so they have, I guess, money or to get a draft pick to trade up or whatever. And they have Blake Griffin. Now Blake Griffin's a really interesting player because obviously he has this massive contract, 35 plus $1 million per year, and he's old and he's injured. Those are the problems with him. If he played like he did last season, maybe they keep him honestly, for 1 or 2 more years. But they have to try to trade him. It's going to be really hard because he has a massive contract. He's injury prone. But which teams would want him? Which teams would want Blake Griffin? First people that come to mind are maybe the Trailblazers because they've been searching for the power forward or even just forward in general position. Um, I even heard some talks, maybe just talks or whatever, that like Miami. It wasn't anything serious, but just people have been speculating, I guess. Because I don't know, but where do you get Blake Griffin? I mean, you're really gonna have to attach either a first or second or even like a younger player. I don't know, Seku or some other player just to get off of his contract. Was it's extreme, and I don't think any other teams want to pick it up. And then also you come to Derrick Rose. Rose is still honestly a really good player. I don't think people realized he averaged just under 20 points this year. But same, if you're gonna really embrace a rebuild, you really gotta trade him. He doesn't have a crazy contract. He really doesn't even make 10 million a year, but you gotta trade him. And I know like the Lakers, the Clippers are interested because even though they got Clippers Reggie Jackson, the Lakers Waiters, they're still searching for like a pretty good guard that can play make and score pretty well. They're still on that search, so it's pretty interesting where Rose will end up. But no matter what, it's still just interesting how they'll take this rebuild, how they'll decide which route they'll go in. Because you have to think of the players they have on their roster now. Sekou Duboya, he's a lot of potential. He's pretty young. He's 18, 19, but he's raw. He's a lot of raw talent. There's no talent bursting right now that's saying, I'm going to average 20 points and be an all-star, all-defensive team or whatever next season. He's really just a big block of potential, and you have to hope that at some point the potential bursts. And instead of just being a young team, or a young player, I should say, he's actually a legitimate superstar. We say what you want, he's not even 20 yet, but there has to be some point where you say, well, if he's not going to break out now, then he's not going to really break out. Then you come to other players, Christian Wood. Now, Wood has a lot of potential. I'm really a big fan of Wood, and I hope he does have a very long and successful career. And I think he will resign in Detroit, but it's pretty interesting because Wood is at like 21. He's already about 24, 25. So I think if they already keep Wood, he really will promise them, I can really help bring this team to winning. And I think it would have been really interesting if they traded Drummond before the season and saw how Wood could take them. Because even before Drummond was traded, when Wood was coming off the bench, he was putting up good games. He had a few 30-point games. And it was just really amazing to see that this guy who was floating around teams last year, was it the Bucks or whatever it was, he's now finding success in a place like Detroit. And Detroit has to be happy that they found at least a budding star because I think Wood has really potential to be an all-star. Maybe not all NBA, but really has a good potential to be a good rebounder and scorer. He's a pretty decent shooter for the center position. But also players, I guess, like who are they going to take in the draft? I'm assuming they'll have a top five pick, maybe top 10 if they get a little bit unlucky. But who are they going to take? Now you want to target. I think they need a point guard. They should target a point guard, whether it's Cole Anthony, Anthony Edwards as a shooting guard, but still LaMelo Ball. But I think it would be more interesting if they really decided to go for a raw talent route. If they really doubled down on a player like Sekou Duboya and said, "We think you're going to be a superstar. We think you have lots of potential." So instead of taking a very polished talent, like I guess you could say Cole Anthony, or Anthony Edwards, you take a very project type of player, whether that's Killian Hayes. Killian Hayes could be a really interesting player for this team as a good passer and all-around player, or Theo Maledon, but I think Killian Hayes would be super interesting for this team because the Pistons, how are you going to develop him? How are you going to choose a direction with the draft pick? And of course, they're heading in the direction of a rebuild. But in the rebuild, like I said before, there's so many different routes they can take. They want to take polished talent and go with that, like Christian Wood and maybe like a LaMelo Ball or Cole Anthony? Or do they really want to go on a raw talent and uncrafted players like Sekou Doumbouya and a player like Killian Hayes? It's really interesting, and the Pistons have to make this decision. Another interesting part is their coaching job. They brought in Dwayne Casey last year because they assumed, which they did, that they'd make the playoffs. It was just an eighth seed, but still, they assumed they'd make the playoffs, and they even thought they'd have success, which is interesting. This year, I really actually did think they would have some decent success. Then, of course, you have the big Blake Griffin injury. Drummond's not happy, and Derrick Rose is, aging, and he can't really carry a team as much as he used to before his, very sad injury. So I actually really thought they had legitimate good potential this year. Rose at the point guard, then a player like Luke Kennard, who's a lockdown shooter. Sorry, not lockdown. Who's a dead-eye shooter, or a player like Bruce Brown, who's a decent defender. And then you got Tony Snell and those other guys. And Christian Wood, I guess he was on the bench, but nobody really suspected that he'd achieve the level which he is now. But then you also have Blake Griffin at the power forward. Then you got Andre Drummond at the center. Drummond's really interesting. I'm really happy they got rid of him because I'm a very big fan of Drummond. I think he's a good player, even if he doesn't affect winning as much in the modern NBA. But I was a really big fan of Drummond, and I wanted them to trade him, but I really wanted them to choose who they traded him to. They traded him to the Cavs for 2 expiring deals, which is smart because they can free up cap if they do decide to try to go full in a few years once they have developed young players. But they could have tried to go for value because the Hawks went for Capella. I think Capella is a little bit of a better player than Drummond, because he really knows his role, Capella. He doesn't shoot threes or try to handle the ball, which if you kind of think is funny what Drummond does, he's dribbling up the court or whatever. But the Hawks, I think they would have given them some decent value because you see the Hawks, they kind of want to go winning now because they really want to make sure that they keep players like Trae Young happy, John Collins. I thought it would have been interesting. Would they have given up a player like Cam Reddish, DeAndre Hunter? It's unlikely, but if the Pistons really tried, maybe they could have squeezed that talent out of it. Or the Celtics. The Celtics would have to match salaries. So a player like Gordon Hayward was a player option. I think Hayward would be a really interesting player for that team. But if you drafted a small forward, I don't know who you'd say, but let's just say you drafted a small forward, I think Hayward would be a really good mentor because he's a veteran player and he knows how to play the game really well. He's just like a very fundamentally sound player, another one. Or there were talks of Drummond take him to Cleveland was just a total surprise. Nobody expected he'd go to Cleveland, but there were talks to so many other teams that when he went to Cleveland, I really thought, yes, they got expiring contracts and what a first or second round pick, but could they have gotten more value out of Drummond? It's something really interesting. And how much value are they going to get out of Rose? Because although he's a pretty good player, he's in his not mid, but he's in his early 30s, and how many more years of really good production and useful production does he have? Griffin, they're going to have to attach a pick definitely to get rid of him. There's no way that some team will just take on Blake Griffin because they want to have a big contract of an injury-prone player. And then you have to figure out which direction of the rebuild are you taking, and are you hanging on to Christian, which I think they should? Are you going to go for raw talent like Sekou Doumbouya and Killian Hayes? Are you going to take a polished player like Cole Anthony? It's really just the Pistons have a really interesting situation, and I really hope they handle it because you really got to get them back into the NBA Finals, or at least into a contending playoff spot. You don't want to be just known as an 8th seed that just sneaks into the playoffs. You want to be known as a legitimate contender, even whether that's in 5 years or 10 years. They really have to make smart decisions so that success comes somewhere down the line.